The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Cheshire East for another run out here in beautiful Cheshire. Now I've got a whole lot of interesting stories to tell you this week. There's one on Friday which involves the last court jester in England. He can wait his turn though, because here in this village we've got a fair few stories to tell as well. One involves a very old oak tree which I'm hopefully going to get to see in the flesh on this walk around. There's another one involving this church right here. That's one of the oldest churches of its type in England. You can find it in Marton. Marton, farm by a pool. This week on TVI we make a return to Cheshire East again, and today we're in a village that's famous for a tree. Marton is a small rural parish on the A34 between Congleton and Macclesfield, with fields, woods and big skies all around it, complemented by the gently rolling Cheshire countryside. The name Marton comes from Old English. Most scholars link it to a mere, and so we get the meaning farm or settlement by a lake or a pool. As a settled place, Marton grew out of scattered farms within the large ancient parish of Prestbury on the edge of the Forest of Macclesfield. By the 14th century, it was important enough for the Davenport family to found a chapel here, which later gained its own parish status. Local tradition holds that the church here now stands on a prehistoric mound, which maybe had a ritual use in pre-Christian times. The great age of the Marton oak, the famous tree that we've just mentioned, suggests a long continuity of farming and routeways out here too. Marton is not clearly named in the Domesday Book, but we do know the area lay within estates later linked to Prestbury. The survey records local woodlands and small holdings here under Norman control, the very framework into which Marton's later township neatly fitted. Through the Middle Ages, Marton formed part of the Davenport estate, with Marton Hall as their local seat. In the 19th century, the property passed to the Bromley Davenport family, who remained major landowners. The hall is still here. It's a black and white timber building, which is now a farmhouse. The hall is awesome, but the defining landmark today is the Grade 1 listed Church of St James and St Paul. It's a rare timber-framed medieval church, founded and endowed in 1343 by Sir John de Davenport and his son Vivian. The church even appears in Alan Garner's novel Strandloper. If you were to go on a gentle walk around Marton, you would also take in the famous Marton Oak on Oak Lane, now hollow and fragmented, yet still alive. There's also the Davenport Arms, a primary school, and some converted farm buildings where you can eat these days. Nobody famous lives here, but over the centuries Marton has had generations of farming families. It's the Davenports and the Bromley Davenports who were most influential. Today, villagers, schoolchildren and visitors all share the same lanes and the same landmarks. So in short, Marton's story runs from a farm by a pool to a small village known for an ancient church and a mighty oak. Farming and modern village life sit close together here, giving this corner of Cheshire a character that's hard to match. Let's have a look. Okay, so to begin with, let's get one thing clear. Marton is a big parish when it comes to its size. The village itself is tiny, and out to the west there's a lot of these narrow lanes, typical of Cheshire East. For the first part of this video, we'll drive along them for a bit. There's not a lot to see because what few properties there are out here are scattered all over the place. Generally it's all farmland with the odd house here and there. This is all part of the Cheshire Plain, a vast area of rural goodness in which Marton sits. Marton's Church of St James and St Paul sits beside the A34 and has a presence that stops you in your tracks. It began in 1343, founded by Sir John de Davenport and his son Vivian. They chose timber rather than stone, which gives the place its look today. This is one of the oldest timber churches in Europe. The nave and the aisles sit under one long roof, supported by medieval piers and timber arches. The belfry has a shingled brooch spire, topped with a weathercock. Restoration has played a big part in keeping this church alive. In 1871, the architect William Butterfield repaired the tower timbers, strengthening the upper structure without losing its character. The church has always been linked to the Davenport family, who gifted land again in 1370 to support its upkeep, and their early decisions still guide the look and feel of this building. Even today, those historic ties are still alive thanks to this being part of a benefice that includes Capesthorne and Eton. This church has even found its way into modern writing. Alan Garner used it in his novel Strandloper, weaving it into the life of the main character in that book. It's not a well-known link, but it adds another thread to the long life of this place. Church is open, so we'll have a look around inside, shall we? The first thing that strikes you the second you walk in here is the fact that all these timber beams are still in place. This is quite something. This is certainly not your regular church by any stretch of the imagination. It certainly sounds a bit different here as well. If you walk into any sort of typical stone church, there's a sort of echo. Well, in here there isn't. It feels a lot more sort of closed in. The sound is different. I can't really describe it, but that's just the way I sort of feel about the inside of this church on first impressions anyway. Let's have a wander up into the chancel. Got an organ on the right here, and then we have a very nice stained glass window at the end above the altar, and this is the view back down the nave. Absolutely beautiful church. This sort of takes you back in time a little bit. It's a sort of a bygone era. Lovely building, really is. There's a pennant hanging up there that just says St James and St Paul, Martin Rose Queen. There's the font at the back, and there you go. Great little church, well worth calling in if it's open. I didn't expect this to be open, to be fair, but it was. Right, let's head back out and let's have a walk around the rest of Marton. Now next up, I'm going to take you to an old farm building which is just behind this church, actually, along the A34. That's the road you can see there. It's called Lapopoti. Lapopoti is next. This sits within a converted red brick barn that still carries its old farm shape. The restaurants first opened in 2009 at Church Farm, created by Victor and Lynn Jansen. They shaped it around French cooking, keeping things relaxed but careful. Their aim was simple: good food, cooked well, served without fuss. A new chapter began in 2019 when fresh owners took over. With them came a renewed focus on French casual fine dining, keeping the relaxed feel but raising the ambition in the kitchen. Lapopoti's menu leans into French favourites. Coq au vin, cassoulet and other classics appear often, cooked with care and served without unnecessary decoration. The building itself adds to the experience and nothing is overdone. Recognition has therefore followed. Lapopoti has since earned a place in the Michelin Guide in 2022, a clear sign that the kitchen's direction is working. It also appears in the Good Food Guide, Harden's and other respected listings. In a small village like Marton, it feels like a place that knows exactly what it wants to be. For a long time, Marton has had a pub. Here it is. It's called the Davenport Arms, taking its name from the family we've just learned about. This sits on Congleton Road, right at the point where the A34 dips past the church and the old farm buildings. From the outside it looks like a modern country pub, but in actual fact this is a food-led place with a clear focus on British dishes. Indeed, this presents itself as a country pub and grill, and that description fits the experience well. The interior is polished and modern with soft lighting and a layout that makes the most of the space. It's not trying to be old-fashioned or themed. Instead, it offers a simple, confident setting where the food can take centre stage. The menu leans heavily on British classics with handmade pies, brisket and steak dishes forming the backbone. These are the plates that keep people coming back, especially those who want something hearty after a day out in Cheshire. Sunday roasts are one of the pub's busiest features. They draw in groups of all sizes, helped by the fact that the pub can handle large bookings with ease. The pub is also known for being dog-friendly, especially in the bar areas. Marton Meadows Golf Club now. This began life in 1998, created by Tony Derbyshire on some former Guernsey dairy meadows. The course was designed by Neville Pearson, who created it as a 9-hole pay-and-play layout. That simple idea still guides the place now. Basically, you turn up, you play, and you enjoy the ground without any fuss. It's golf stripped back to its bare essentials, and that's part of its appeal. The ground was built to USGA construction specifications, which gives the greens a firmness and a consistency that golfers notice straight away. In 2017, the club was purchased by Kyle and Kelly Hares, who began a programme of improvements. One of the biggest steps forward since has been the introduction of top tracer technology on the practice range. The club also houses a double indoor simulator suite, which doubles as a teaching space. This means coaching can continue in all weather and players can work on technique with clear data and controlled conditions. In 2024, the club joined the Cheshire Union of Golf Clubs, connecting Marton Meadows more firmly with the county's golfing network and supporting its growing role in local coaching and competition. It's a sign of how far the club has come since its early days.
Okay, so everything you've seen so far is kind of at the southern end of Marton Village. The rest of this walk is going to focus on the northern end. We've got a bit of a walk now. We're going to walk up the A34 for a short distance and take a right turn then through some sort of housing areas and past the old school and the current Marton School actually as well. And then hopefully we'll see the Marton Oak, which is a big tree. And it's on this road here, Oak Lane, which is where we'll come out back onto the A34 in a bit.
Now we're at the old school. Built in 1841 as Marton National School, it was designed to serve local children at a time when education was becoming more structured. It was funded in part by the Davenport family, who supported its creation and early running. In its early years, the school had just one classroom and a single teacher. That meant small-scale lessons were simple and direct, with children of different ages learning side by side. By 1873, the school needed more space, and so an infant's room was added. The playground came next, created on former glebe land beside the school. In 1894, the roof was repaired after storm damage, and the work kept the structure sound for decades. Electricity arrived in the late 1940s, bringing light and power to a building that had previously relied on daylight and simple lamps. Over time, the school became a Church of England aided school, strengthening its link with the parish. That arrangement lasted until the 1960s, when a new school opened and the old building closed. After its closure, the old school was converted for private use. So here we have the modern school, Marton and District C of E. This opened in the 1960s when the old 1841 school could no longer cope with rising pupil numbers. The new building gave Marton a fresh start, with more space, better light, and a layout designed for modern teaching. The first head teacher transferred directly from the old school, helping the children settle into their new surroundings without losing the sense of guidance they were used to. The hall, added soon after opening, gave the school a proper space for PE, assemblies and performances. The school field arrived in the late 1960s, giving pupils a proper outdoor space for sport and play. During the 1980s, the school expanded again, adding new rooms to cope with rising numbers. This growth led to its current name. You see, Marton and District recognises the fact that there are pupils here who travel in from Eton, Siddington and other nearby villages. Ofsted inspections over the years have recorded good progress, noting the school's strong teaching and supportive environment.
Right, moment of truth time as far as the Marton Oak goes, because that's next. Now here you can see we've got a driveway, and this is the driveway of Marton Oak House. Now this is where the famous tree is located. It's in the garden of this property. Now if you want to go and see the Marton Oak, you have to ask permission. Now I tried to get in contact with these guys to ask if I could actually go and see this tree, but nobody's got back to me. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take myself up the drive and see if there's anybody in. And indeed there was somebody in, and they have let me have a look at this oak tree. There it is, my friends. That is the Marton Oak. What a tree. Let's talk a bit about it.
The Marton Oak stands just off Oak Lane within a private garden. You have to get permission to actually see this, but there are plenty of people who have managed. Estimated at over 1,200 years old, it's classified as a veteran sessile oak, one of Britain's oldest trees. Its trunk is split into two separate living parts, but there are smaller bits. Each half of the tree rises like a small tree in its own right, yet beneath the ground they all share the same system, keeping the whole structure alive. The circumference was once measured at around 58 feet. The split trunk is not a sign of decline, it's actually a natural way for ancient oaks to survive as they grow older. The natural buttressing around the base helps keep the sections upright. Despite its age, it needs very little human intervention. Now, ecologists have studied the Marton Oak for years. It supports bats, owls and insects that rely on old wood for shelter. The oak has also played a part in village life. For generations, children danced around it on May Day, weaving ribbons and singing as part of spring celebrations. As you can imagine, this is one of the most photographed spots in Marton. Storms have taken their toll over time, but the oak continues to grow. If you are lucky enough to see it for yourself, you'll be amazed. Forget the major oak in Sherwood Forest, this thing is far more incredible.
I'm not going to lie, people, that's made my day that I've been able to get to see the Marton Oak. I wasn't totally sure if I could get to it, but it just shows a bit of politeness goes a long way. Just basically knocked on the door, asked the lady of the house, can I take a few shots of the tree? And they were more than happy to allow me to do so. So there you go, there's the Marton Oak. And what a tree it is, eh? Now between here and the end, it's mainly all residential. But once we finish this walk, we'll then be heading down to Marton Hall, which is the only major thing we've yet to cover.
Marton Hall is the ideal way to cap this one off. As we know, the Davenports were key figures in this village, and this is where they lived. Built as the Davenport family seat in the 18th century, it replaced an earlier timber-framed manor house. The hall originally sat within formal gardens, laid out to frame the front elevation and guide visitors towards the entrance. The gardens appeared clearly on 1840s tithe maps, which help us understand the scale of the estate at that time. The building itself was faced with black and white timbering. Later, brick extensions were added, changing the shape of the hall and giving it more space for the Bromley Davenport family who came along later. Nearby stood stables and coach houses, essential parts of any working estate. During the 20th century, portions of the estate were sold off as farming needs changed and the cost of maintaining large houses increased. The main house also suffered fire damage in the mid-1900s, a blow that accelerated its decline. Structural problems followed, and without the resources to restore it fully, the hall entered a long period of deterioration. The damage left parts of the buildings unsafe, and demolition became unavoidable for several sections. What remained was converted into the farmhouse you can see here today. Marton is a great little village, isn't it? And you know what? Nothing here feels accidental. Everything sits where it sits because someone at some point made a choice that still matters today. The church is the prime example of that. Marton Hall's remains, the golf course on the old dairy meadows, the Davenport Arms, Lapopoti, and the footpaths that link them all together give the village a rhythm that's easy to follow. You can stand almost anywhere and see how one part leads naturally to the next. And then of course there's the Marton Oak, rising in its great split form just off Oak Lane. It anchors everything, not through grandeur, but through sheer endurance. When you look at that tree and then look back across Marton, you truly appreciate what a great little village this really is.
I've stood through frost and thunder's call, watched fields turn green, then gold and bare. I've seen the hall rise, fall and fade, and felt each footstep passing near. I've watched the church through every age, heard bells ring out across the ground. I've seen new paths cut through the grass and heard old voices all around. I keep my place, though storms may bend me. Still I breathe and still I stand. I am the oak that guards this place, split in form yet living strong. I've watched your lives move around my shade, holding time in every limb. I am the oak that keeps your past, and I will stand. I've seen the school doors open wide, new faces learning day by day. I've watched the meadows turn to greens and golfers walking through the dew. I've seen the pub lights glow at dusk, heard laughter drifting through the air. I've watched Lapopoti fill with cheer and felt the season circle on. I keep my place, though storms may bend me. Still I breathe and still I stand. I am the oak that guards this place, split in form yet living strong. I've watched your lives move around my shade, holding time in every limb. I watched your paths cross through the years, holding all that passed my way. Round the old oak, step and sway, ribbon bright on this May Day. Round we dance in light and play, round the oak on this May Day.
Hello folks, welcome back to Cheshire East once again. Now you can hear some rushing water where I'm standing right here. I'm actually on a bridge which is over a little brook. It's called the Midge Brook. I'll just show you what I can see here. There we go, there's the Midge Brook, and the water you can hear is splashing its way down this lovely cascade here and then going underneath the road where I'm standing. Now the Midge Brook used to power a mill which is just out of shot to the right here. That mill was Somerford Mill, and you can find that in the parish of Somerford Booths.
Somerford Booths, shelters at the Summer Ford. Today in Cheshire East we find ourselves in Somerford Booths, a small quiet parish just northwest of Congleton, lying between the River Dane and the Midge Brook. It has under 200 residents, a set of scattered farms and a small hamlet called Newsbank. The name Somerford comes from two Old English words meaning a ford used in the summer when river levels were low enough to cross, and booths, which are simple timber or turf shelters, as we learned back in Derbyshire last year. Somerford Booths began as a township within the ancient parish of Astbury. It became a separate entity in the 19th century and now shares a grouped parish council with neighbouring Hulme Walfield. Keep that name in mind, it's coming your way soon. If we wind the clock back nearly 1,000 years, this landscape was already settled. By 1086, the area formed part of the Domesday Hundred of Hammerstan, with cultivated land, woodland, and a small population working the soil beside the River Dane. In the Domesday Book, Somerford Booths is recorded with just 3 households, including 2 slaves and a rider, under Earl Hugh of Chester. There were 3 ploughlands, and in all it had a modest value of a few shillings. It was a tiny, but an organised estate. Later, Somerford Booths became closely tied to the Swetnam family, who held the manor for centuries. The Swetnams lived at Somerford Booths-Hall until the estate was finally sold in the 20th century, ending what was a very long line of ownership. And even today, the defining landmark here is Somerford Booths Hall. It's a Grade 2 listed country house built in 1612 as a moated dwelling, originally for Edmund Swetnam. With its E-shaped plan, it stands above the Dane as this one's most recognisable historic house. People here have mostly been farmers, labourers and estate workers, but the Swetnams stand out. Among their number was a naval officer by the name of Clement William Swetnam, and earlier Tudor gentry such as Sir William Swetnam. The hall is not alone in terms of listed buildings here. Elsewhere there's Grove House Farmhouse with a timber-framed core, Broomfield Farmhouse, a lovely former watermill, and an old primitive Methodist chapel at Wernish Nook, which is now a private house. So, Somerford Booths today is a chunk of Cheshire defined by fields, lanes and scattered houses, once shaped by a summer ford and a fine country house. You have to drive through it slowly to really appreciate the Cheshire countryside around Congleton. So, let's do that today, shall we? At the northern end of Somerford Booths, a gentle bend in the Midge Brook holds Somerford Mill, a former water-powered corn mill just north of Newsbank. Its brass-shot water wheel once made it notable, with water striking that wheel halfway up. In the 1960s, J. Harold Norris listed this as a simple corn mill, making its purpose clear. Grain went in, flour came out. For generations it served the local grain trade. By the 20th century, watermills across Cheshire were falling silent as roller mills and new transport took over. Somerford Mill's machinery has now gone or been altered, leaving its walls, its roofs and old watercourses as clues to its former life. Regardless, when you stand here, you are looking at a textbook example of an English rural watermill site, which relied entirely on the flow of the brook. Time for a drive now, the first of two we'll undertake here. We're going for a simple run here from Somerford Mill to Somerford Booths-Hulme, a journey that takes only a few minutes. To get between the two, you have to follow a narrow lane as it threads between hedges and open fields. The road also passes through Newsbank, which is the main area of population here in Somerford Booths. It's not much more than just a collection of houses, to be honest, but it should be put on the map all the same. The brook is out of view now, but we're heading towards the River Dane. In and out of view periodically are the likes of farm driveways. Soon the hall's main entrance will come into sight, set back behind some trees, but the entrance is as close as we're going to get to it. Somerford Booths-Hulme sits behind a grassy bank and is for the most part invisible from this road. Luckily, the hall is quite well documented, so there's plenty we can say for it. Visually though, this will come at you in pictures. I've no way of getting close to it with the camera. Somerford Booths-Hulme is a country house built in 1612 for Edmund Swetnam, a member of a long-established Cheshire family. It originally stood within a rectangular moat, a defensive feature that survived long after it was needed. Traces of that water-filled enclosure are recorded in listing details and historic surveys, though it is now little more than just a reminder of the past. The hall itself is recognised as a Grade 2 listed building, a status it's held since 1952. The hall is made from rendered brick with ashlar dressings, giving it a neat solidity and a crisp detail. Smooth stone frames around its doors and windows stand out against rendered surfaces. Its slate roof is punctuated by strong stone chimney stacks that rise cleanly against the sky. From the garden side, its E-shaped plan can be appreciated. It's a classic Jacobean layout with projecting wings and a central porch. At the centre of the south front, a porch projects, carrying the inscription ES 1612, referring to Edmund Swetnam and the year the house was built. Inside, the hall has altered since his time. In around 1817, the interior was remodelled and enlarged, keeping the older outer shell while updating the rooms. Those early 19th century alterations are linked to the architect John Webb. The Swetnam family held Somerford Booths-Hulme for generations, only leaving in the 1930s, so it's not yet been a full century since the last Swetnam lived here. After their departure, the hall was adapted for office use, a practical way of keeping it occupied and maintained. Over time, the grounds were subdivided for new housing development. Marketing material and planning documents describe new homes within the former parkland, with the historic hall retained as the centrepiece, protected by its listed status. A major restoration project has now returned the hall to residential use. Developers and conservation specialists worked under listed building consent to create high-quality living space inside the historic shell. Regardless, Somerford Booths-Hulme remains the key historic landmark here. Time for our second short drive. This time we're heading from Somerford Booths-Hulme to a little hamlet called Wernish Nook. Easing out past the hall's entrance, we follow the narrow lane as it bends eastwards. Soon, Wernish Nook will come into view. Like Newsbank, again it's a small cluster of houses, this time gathered around the left-hand side of the road before the parish comes to an end. The place has a former chapel, which we're going to stop and have a look at.
It's a bumpy old lane, this Wernish Nook. I've just driven up it and turned around so that I can find a place to park, because as you can see, it's quite narrow. Can't really park on this road without blocking it. But yeah, it's a dead end, and it's just basically just a cluster of houses, and one of those is the chapel, which is the one you can see right there behind this tree.
Primitive Methodists were gathering at Wernish Nook before there was a chapel, and records from the late 1820s mention meetings here. They likely met in a cottage or a barn, or possibly outdoors, given what we know about the Prims. By 1833, those meetings had a proper home, a chapel built at Wernish Nook. When the 1851 religious census took place, an average of 40 people attended afternoon worship. Alongside services, the chapel ran a school with 27 scholars. Those details were recorded by Henry Bostock, the chapel steward, who lived at Radnor near Congleton and completed the census return. Some Ordnance Survey maps label the building as Wesleyan, which has caused a bit of confusion. However, the National Archives catalogue states that the chapel was sold to the Wesleyan Methodists in 1891, offering a likely explanation. The same summary records closure in 1967. After closure, the chapel was sold and became a private dwelling. Today, the former chapel survives as Chapel House. The parish of Somerford Booths feels small and open, defined by the steady presence of the River Dane and the Midge Brook. What strikes you as you travel between its few spots is how it all seems to be connected together. This may be scattered and rural, but there is some cohesion. Somerford Booths-Hulme carries its long history in every gable and stone it possesses. Somerford Mills sits by the river where a wheel once turned. Wernish Nook keeps the outline of its old chapel in the shape of Chapel House. We certainly haven't seen the last of places like this, and certainly not here in Cheshire. There are many more waiting for us just like this in this county, and speaking of which, tomorrow's episode will prove me right. I'll see you there.
Rolling now past the mill by the river, tires humming soft on the narrow road, fields opening out as the hedges scatter, old water still drifting where the wheel once flowed. Up ahead the hall lifts through the trees, gables catching light as the track curves round, stone and slate holding years in their timber, a calm old place on slightly higher ground. I keep on driving, taking in each turn, letting these small corners guide my way. Past the mill, past the hall, past the chapel's face, every stretch feels steady in its own small way. It's a pleasure to pass through Somerford Booths, it brightens up my day. Amish nook comes into view. Chapel house sitting neat by the roadside bend. Brick and slate holding traces of old hymns. A place once filled with voices that would blend. I ease along, watching fields drift by. River Dane slipping close on my right. Farm tracks branching off into the distance, each one fading gently out of sight. I keep on driving, taking in each turn, letting these small corners guide my way. Past the mill, past the hall, past the chapel's face. Every stretch feels steady in its own small way. It's a pleasure to pass through Somerford Booths, it brightens up my day. The hall, past the chapel's face. Every stretch feels steady in its own small way. It's a pleasure to pass through Somerford Booths, it brightens up my day. Somerford Booths, with your fields and turning road, where the river drips and flows. I'll keep driving while the daylight stays, letting each small moment guide my way.
Hello people, welcome back to Cheshire East once again. Now today I've got a parish for you that's a tale of two worlds. You've got one part of this which is very, very rural, and that's the part I'm standing in right now. I'll just show you. Look at this, this is my view right now. You're not going to get much more rural than that, are you? But there's another part to this one that's also very urban as well, and that's the part that's closest to Congleton, the town that we've been heading sort of towards so far this week. This is the parish of Hulme Walfield. Hulme Walfield, island near a walled enclosure. Today on TVI we're in the parish of Hulme Walfield, just to the north of Congleton in Cheshire East. In this one we're going to be seeing two different worlds. Out here, the vast rural expanse of Cheshire meets a brand new urban area. There are two parts to the village's name. Hulme is usually linked to Old Norse or Old English words for a river meadow or some raised ground in a marsh. Essentially it means an island. Walfield is thought to mean wall field, an early enclosure of some sort, or maybe an earthwork. For centuries, Hulme Walfield formed a township within the ancient parish of Astbury under Cheshire's old Northwich Hundred. In 1878 it gained its own ecclesiastical status, but it was grouped with Somerford Booths and Radnor. Today it shares a parish council with Somerford Booths. Long before written records, this was an area defined by clay soil, streams and meres. It was a very wet area. Later tradition links Walfield with a Roman camp somewhere in the township, though the exact site of that is now lost. In the Domesday Book, the area now called Hulme Walfield was probably included within the wider estates around Astbury and Congleton, both held under the Earl of Chester. It was, at that time, not a named unit in its own right, seeing as it was more just a patch of farmland and swampland. By the 1890s, it had seen major landowners come and go, including the MP William Bromley Davenport, he of the family we met in Marton, and Hugh Ernest Varden. It had certainly developed. The defining landmark today is St Michael's Church on Giant's Wood Lane. It's a handsome Gothic revival building in sandstone. Designed by George Gilbert Scott and built in the 1850s, it began as a chapel of ease to Astbury. Hulme Walfield's other landmarks within the village itself are a bit scarce, but when you take into account the area covers Westlow Mere, things change. Westlow Mere was once a reservoir and now it's a broad sheet of water used for angling. The mere, though, now has other things to put it on the map.
In recent times, Congleton has seen vast amounts of urban expansion as the town gradually grows north. In doing so, new properties have sprung up in Hulme Walfield's boundaries. Most of those now encircle West Lomere, and that's why, as I said at the top, this one is a place where the very rural meets the very urban. Regardless, it's all centred on water, pasture, and long views over the Cheshire Plain. Let's go and have a look at it.
Okay, so we haven't got much of a walk to do today. Effectively, we're just going to walk down what is the main street in Hulme Walfield Village. We're going to be walking past the church and an old school, but we're starting this walk at Hulme Walfield Old Hall, which is this magnificent building right here. Now, there are two halls in Hulme Walfield. This is the old hall, and then there's a newer hall, which is across this field, which we'll drive to at the end. It's a bit too far away to walk on foot. So basically we're going from hall to hall in this first bit.
So this here is the defining landmark of Hulme Walfield. It's St Michael's Church. This was built in 1855 and 56 and was shaped by the hand of Sir George Gilbert Scott. Its domineering sandstone walls are the first thing that catch your eye. At first, this simply served as a chapel of ease, giving local people a nearer place to gather without travelling to Astbury. Then, in 1878, it stepped into a new role ecclesiastically as a parish church in its own right. The sandstone gives it a very warm look, especially in late afternoon light. It feels like a building that belongs exactly where it stands, created by the materials and the skills of the area. It's Grade 2 listed as well, a status granted in March 1987. The pantile roof, added later, gives the church a slightly different texture from its original form, but it works well with the Gothic Revival style. Scott's design is clear in the pointed arches, the tracery and the balanced proportions. Around the church are trefoil-headed two light windows which bring in soft light and add delicate detail to the sandstone walls. Look up to the east gable and you'll spot a double bellcote, a simple but effective feature. Outside in the churchyard there are two war graves. A couple of steps away from the church is Hulme Walfield's old school. It was built in 1851 with its own attached house. Inside, the main schoolroom was originally planned for 100 pupils, though records from 1896 tell us that only 44 turned up on the average day. It taught boys and girls together. That was a practical choice for a farming area like this, where children were needed at home as much as in the classroom. The building's early life was tied closely to Astbury Parish, which oversaw the area until Hulme Walfield broke away in the 1870s. The school and the church formed a cohesive pair of buildings. Both were shaped by the Davenport estate's influence at the time they were built. Together, they anchored Hulme Walfield, one guiding daily learning, the other guiding Sunday worship.
So once you get beyond the old school, the road then starts to bend a little bit as it heads towards Congleton. We'll be going down there in a few moments' time, but first of all we have to take a left turn to go to the other hall, which we talked about at the beginning of this video. So what I'm going to do is going to walk to the end of the houses up there and we'll film our walk back to the car, which is parked outside the church. We'll then hop in the car, we'll go up to the hall, check that out, and then we'll head off into Congleton town.
On Smithy Lane there's a much older building to discuss, Hulme Walfield-Hall. It's one of the 3 listed buildings in this village, the other 2 being the church and a dwelling called Brick Farmhouse. Of the 3, it's the hall that has the greatest historical status. The hall's beginnings lie in the 1600s, long before the church or the school were even thought of. It was a period when brick farmhouses were gaining ground across Cheshire. Stand close to it and the red Flemish bond brickwork should be the first thing you notice. Above, a plain tile roof settles neatly over the 3-storey front. The hall's height gives the building a tall, upright stance, and therefore it stands out among the surrounding fields. It feels like a building built to last, not simply to impress. The entrance is a real highlight. It's a classical doorway framed by Tuscan pillars. Above them, there's an open pediment holding a fanlight. It's a confident piece of design for a rural farmhouse. Behind the main block, there's an older wing from the 1600s, though later render covers much of it now.
So the lane this hall stands on runs towards a place called Eaton. You'll need to know that for tomorrow because that's going to feature heavily tomorrow. But that's for tomorrow. To get to Eaton, I'm going the other way, and that's because to the south of everything you've seen so far in Hulme Walfield, there's a massive expanse of new housing. It's flanked by something called the Congleton Link Road, which we'll be driving down as well. So get ready for a bit of a sea change here, people, because this is all very rural and very nice. It's about to get urban.
Hulme Walfield is a very rural village, once defined by raised ground within a wet and boggy area. Surrounding it is farmland today, though that farmland is now shrinking. The south of the parish reaches an area around Westlow Mere. The mere still exists, but the open fields now are disappearing a bit. Most of these homes you see here appeared through the 2010s and the 2020s. These streets all sit within the Congleton local plan, part of the planned growth belt around the town's northern edge. This was once working land grazed by cattle and horses, cut for hay and ploughed for crops. Parts of the area were used for sand extraction. Westlow Mere itself was formed through that industrial use before later being managed as a fishing lake. Some new houses now look towards that calm sheet of water. As with most new estates, these are not especially notable. Instead, they are modern with curving cul-de-sacs and loops designed to slow traffic. House types include detached, semi-detached and mews designs. It feels like a compact world wrapped around the Mere's edge, with small play areas and green corridors threading between the bricks. To the north, between Westlow Mere and Hulme Walfield Village, runs the new Congleton Link Road, built to give quicker access to the A34 and beyond. And so we come to the end of Hulme Walfield, an area of Cheshire shaped primarily by water, by farms and by long straight lanes. It's a bit odd these days, you have to admit, given the northern arm is still very rural and the south is greatly urban. That said, what it does do is bring home how much rural life is changing. St Michael's stands as the old anchor, while Westlow Mere reminds you of what was around here before all the new builds. Ironically, even that was born out of an industrial need. By the time you leave, Hulme Walfield feels like a place where old and new sit side by side without any fuss. Everything links neatly, giving Hulme Walfield a sense of balance. Tomorrow, we're off to another place that's similar, just up the Congleton Link Road.
We step by the mere with a fresh set grin. New paths in our minds as the day drew in. Fields rolled ahead with a soft green sway, and each small track felt like a friendly way. A sandstone church stood calm on the rise, its warm old walls catching gold brush skies. A pair settled near waters so clear, found a village that felt rather near, with a smile and a stride, and the mirror at their side. They said, "This is a grand place right here." Fresh homes now stand where the fields once lay, yet the hush of the mere still guides each day. Old hedge lines mark where the past held sway, and the breeze brings hints of an older way. We wander past farms with an easy glide, finding small delights set near each stride. A pair settled near waters so clear, found a village that felt rather near, with a smile and a stride, and the mirror at their side. They said, "This is a grand place right
Hello folks, welcome back to Cheshire East once again. Although if you stand in this particular spot, you might think you're not in Cheshire. You might think you're in a foreign country somewhere in the Caribbean. That's because this little hamlet I'm currently in is called Havana. Yes, Havana, like the city in Cuba. Well, believe it or not, this is actually named after Havana in Cuba, and in this episode I'll explain why. This is not the Havana episode though, this is just a hamlet within a much larger parish that goes by the name of Eaton. Eaton, farmstead by a river. Today on TVI we're in a place called Eaton. This is just to the north of Congleton in Cheshire East, close to the River Dane and the gentle farmland that spreads towards the Cheshire Plain. It's another village once shaped by agriculture and an old route linking Congleton with Macclesfield. The presence of the River Dane is what gives Eaton its name. Eaton comes from the Old English Eatun, meaning farmstead by a river. The name appears in medieval records in several spellings, but the meaning remains consistent, a settlement defined by water and farmland. Eaton likely formed in the early medieval period as farmland attached to larger estates around Congleton. Its early growth followed the pattern of scattered farmsteads rather than a nucleated village. By the Middle Ages, it had become a recognised township. Although Eaton itself has limited evidence for anything prehistoric, the surrounding area has finds from the Bronze Age and Roman periods, suggesting some long-term activity along the Dane Valley. The river corridor, after all, offered good, fertile ground. Eaton does not appear as a standalone entry in the Domesday Book. Instead, it was part of the wider holdings linked to Congleton and the estates of the Earls of Chester. For sure, though, there was productive landscape under organised control. Through the medieval and early modern periods, Eaton's land was linked to the de Lacy and later the Davenport and Wilbraham families. By the 19th century, Eaton was firmly connected to the Capesthorne and Congleton estates. Fast forward to now, and Eaton's standout feature is a school called Eaton Bank Academy, but technically speaking that's just outside the boundaries. It is though the most widely recognised modern landmark associated with the village. In this episode though, we won't see that school. Instead, we're going to explore Eaton itself, taking in things like the church and the cricket pitch, more mundane villagey type stuff. Eaton also includes a small hamlet called Havana, which once had a silk mill. We'll see that too. Industrially speaking, Eaton has seen generations of farming families. It hasn't produced any nationally famous figures. Instead, its residents have long been tied to Congleton's mills and the many farms that are dotted around the area. Even though it's on Congleton's edge, Eaton's story is one of steady rural life, shaped by mills and the river, the farmland, and some estate influences. Most people fly through it pretty quick to get between Congleton and Macclesfield. I'm going to show you why you should stop. Let's get started with Havana, a name that carries the sound of cannons and sailing ships from 1762, echoing a naval victory far away in Cuba. This lies just inside Eaton's boundaries to the southwest. It's a place shaped by the River Dane and the bold gamble Charles Roe took in the 1760s. He built a mill here, hard against the water. He also gave the place its name, Havana. Roe's first mills did tough work. They turned copper into sheet and brass into wire, all driven by the river. Alongside that, grain was ground for flour in a busy corn mill. This area then was once loud with the ring of hammers and the splash of water wheels. Silk came next, and soon Havana joined the textile trade around Congleton, feeding off the same skills and the same river power. If we could step back to 1801, we would see a very different scene here. There were 5 great water wheels, some as tall as a house, which were all fed by a single fall of water. But as we know, water can destroy things as well as help. In 1872, Bosley Reservoir overflowed and the Dane came roaring through Havana, smashing into mills and workshops. The damage was heavy, and although the works were rebuilt, that flood left a mark on the place. Hard times followed, and Havana picked up a new label, the Deserted Village. Yet the mills did not fail without resistance.
In the 1890s, Andiamo and Company arrived and turned Havana Mill into a cigar factory. It employed up to 400 workers, rolling tobacco leaves in long bright rooms above the Dane. It was a very different feel from the clatter of looms. The tobacco was not Cuban, despite what the name might suggest. It came from India and Indonesia, yet the cigars went out stamped "Made in Havana," nudging buyers to think of Cuba. It was a clever bit of marketing. Across the Atlantic, though, officials were watching. A ruling in the United States in 1902 demanded honest labels, and so that wording lost its power overnight. Without that advantage, Andiamo moved into Congleton in 1906. Havana was all about mills, yes indeed, but the workers needed somewhere to live. That brings us to New Street, houses once occupied by the very people who kept the mill wheels turning. It was a neat line of homes set within Charles Rowe's bold industrial plan for Havana. When Havana flooded in 1872, New Street felt the effects. For a long time, under the nickname the Deserted Village, New Street was pretty much abandoned. However, the cottages were later restored in the mid-1900s, giving the row a fresh lease of life. So what of the Dane now? Well, here it is, as powerful as ever, the watercourse that once powered the industry. You can see why it suited Charles Rowe. The Dane is fast here, perfect for generating power. There's a weir, and that spot formed the backbone of Havana's industrial village, with the drop acting like a constant engine. Machines once relied on it, and the weir fed the large water wheels that turned day after day. For decades after the industry ended, the weir stood without a purpose, its force unused. That was until plans came along to revive it through a hydro scheme, sparking interest in this bend in the river once more. Planning permission took time, but it was eventually granted. Energy firm Siemens agreed to take the electricity once the scheme ran, and later an Archimedes screw was installed beside the weir, turning the river's push into clean power. The scheme now produces around 265,000 kilowatt-hours each year and has run since October 2021. Stand on the footbridge nearby and you can hear the screw turning with a firm rhythm, a reminder that this old weir from the 1760s still has work to do.
I absolutely love this place, I have to say. I mean, when I looked on the map and saw it, I thought this is like a hidden gem. It's kind of at the end of a dead-end road. Not many people probably know it's here. I mean, to be fair, if you look at the map, you wouldn't even necessarily know it was a thing unless the map was in front of you. So, you know, beautiful place. And the people who live here, I think, are extremely lucky too. It's an absolute gem of a place, this Havana. Let's move on. Let's go towards Eton now. But before we do, we have to discuss something else that's industrial.
The mills at Havana are not the only industrial activity Eton Parish has seen. This next section turns to the large quarrying operation Eton is known for. Eton's sand and gravel quarry, run by aggregate giant Tarmac, sits just west of the main village and north of Havana. It occupies land that once formed part of the former Eton Hall estate. That estate has changed beyond recognition these days. The big change came in the 1980s. It was then that large-scale sand extraction took off and Eton Hall was demolished to make room for it. You see, under this part of Cheshire lies Triassic sandstone, weathered into high-purity sand used by glassmakers and foundries. Not everything leaves Eton as fine sand, though. Coarser gravel from the same deposit feeds construction work, going primarily into Cheshire's roads. Water is vital here, and the quarry treats it as a resource. In some restored areas, those water bodies have been shaped into wildlife ponds. Planning applications have pushed the life of Eton Quarry into the 2040s, but there is an end in sight. The plan aims to leave a mix of farmland and wetland when extraction finishes. To keep life comfortable for the neighbours in the meantime, Tarmac have raised earth bunds around key parts of the site, helping cut down noise and dust from machinery. Before heading into Eton Village, there's this pub to cover. The Waggon and Horses sits on the western edge of Eaton Quarry and began life as an alehouse in the 1800s. The first name landlord appears in records from 1824 when the pub worked closely with nearby farms for supplies. In the 1850s, the Waggon and Horses gained its full licence, allowing it to serve ale without restriction. It became known for strong brews and oat cakes. After 1980, when the quarry expanded, workers often ended their day here. A dining room was added in 1994. By 2013, CAMRA had taken full notice of this pub, and so they should, given it has 200 years of heritage.
Okay, here we are then in Eaton Village on the road towards Macclesfield. So let's see what this place has got then. Well, I've parked up here at the local play park, as you can see behind me there. Now this has got a little story to it that's tied to the quarry that we've just discussed, actually. So this is a good place to start. Opposite this, there's a church, there's a village hall, and then a bit further up into the village we've got an old school, and we've got another pub called the Plough. Let's have a look at them all. At last we are in Eaton itself, and the first stop is the Millennium Park. It was created to mark the turn of the year 2000, but it did not appear overnight. It came from 5 years of graft, planning and determination. The opening day arrived on a Saturday when the park was ready to welcome everyone. It was officially opened by Macclesfield's Mayor Diane Millett, who cut the ribbon. One of the first things visitors saw was a carved sign by Harry Harvey. Artist Frank Randall then added paint to it. The park itself sits on 2 acres of land offered on a peppercorn rent, a gesture that made the project possible. Tarmac stepped in to provide the ground, giving Eaton the space it needed. A recent addition here is a sapling from an ancient yew tree in Asbury Churchyard. Walk along Macclesfield Road and the next thing you notice is Christ Church, shaped between 1856 and 1858 under the architect Raffles Brown. It's a small but confident piece of Victorian ambition. Much of the funding for it came from the OMNIBUS family. Its Gothic revival style is clear, with pointed arches and strong lines. A slate roof stretches over the nave and the chancel, covering a 4-bay interior with a hammer beam roof. Inside, the beams rise like timber wings, each one carved and placed with care. The west tower stands firm, topped with a battlemented parapet. Circular clock faces on it keep time for the village, whilst inside it hang 3 bells. The oldest dates from 1815, long before the church was built. 2 more were added in 1876, forming a trio with bright notes. Some stained glass here was made by Forrest and Brownlee of Liverpool. In all, Christ Church has been Grade 2 listed since 1985. A former vicarage once stood nearby, demolished in the 1950s. All that remains is a coach house and the village hall behind the church. Well, this is certainly one of those buildings where you can tell which bit's the newest bit and which bit's the oldest bit. It's pretty obvious in this case because, as you can see, the bits at the front are the newer parts because the brick looks newer, and then at the back you've got the oldest part of the building, which is probably the original church and community hall that was here with all these add-ons. It's like it's had a load of bolt-ons. It's like a mobile phone contract. You can't deny the Waggon and Horses has a lot to it, but it sits a long way out of the village and suits passing trade more than anything like a village local does. The Plough Inn means Eaton has both. Stand outside the Plough today and it's easy to picture its early life as a farmhouse in the 1800s.
In the 1840s it took on a new role as an inn. The first landlord on record was John Barlow, who would have known every face that stepped through the door. His inn served farm workers from the Eaton Hall estate, though stabling was offered for passing traffic between Congleton and Macclesfield as well. The original tap room sat in the south wing, a snug space where strong mild ales were poured. Before Eaton had a village hall, parish meetings were sometimes held inside, with decisions made over tables still in use. When the quarry expanded in the 1980s, workers often came here after long shifts. The pub adapted again in 1996 with a dining room extension. The annual Ploughman's Supper Night remains a highlight here, and today the Plough stands as the only remaining pub within the village itself.
Okay, just up the road, up School Lane, there's a parish notice board. I haven't left a card at all yet this morning. Marton, I never saw a parish notice board at all there. If there was, I must have missed it. Somerford Booths and Hulme Walfield were too small. And finally, I found one in Eaton. So, yeah, let's get this out of the way. There we go. That's another one down here in Cheshire East. Let's carry on up School Lane. We've got the old school to talk about, which is just up here. And then what we'll do is we'll form a loop back onto the main road, and that'll take us back to the green, and we'll cover a few bits and bobs on the green too, because I noticed them just as we were passing the plough there. So we'll add that to the video too.
The last major thing to see in Eaton is the old school on School Lane, once alive with young voices. This was Eaton National School, raised in the mid-1800s with strong backing from the OMNIBUS family. Before it existed, lessons took place in a small dame school at Pear Tree Cottage. The new building served the farming families of Eaton and welcomed children of all ages under one teacher. By the 1890s, it needed more space and a small extension was added. A water pump once stood beside the playground, and electricity arrived in the late 1940s. That was all well and good, but it didn't last. With fewer children in the village, the school grew quieter until 1969, when it closed and its pupils moved to Marton School. The building was later sold and turned into a private house, but the original doorway and lintel remain. The old bell bracket still sits above the porch, even though the bell has long gone. The locals now refer to this building as the Old School.
Okay, so turned around at the old school and went up Crawford Road, which is basically a residential street. Brings you out on this path that I'm currently walking down now, which is adjacent to the main road through the village. There you go, there's the road. And this will take us down to the green. And as I said a few moments ago, there will be a few things I want to cover on the green. One of them I've already mentioned actually is the sign that was unveiled when the park was opened. It's been moved to the green now. So here we are then back at the green in front of the plough. Here's the old phone box, got a defib machine in that. And then we walk across to the green again. Here's the sign that I was just telling you about. And there's a plaque underneath it which tells you that it was made by Harry Harvey. There you go. Millennium sign carved by Harry Harvey, 2001-2002, unveiled April 2003, and of course unveiled by DM Millet, as we already know. And across the road we've got a bus stop. Let's check out what the local bus services are like around here. So this is the Plough, the name of the stop, and this is number 38 you can catch here to Macclesfield. Fairly frequent actually. Then again, we are on a main road, so that does make a bit of sense. Right, we are pretty much all the way around Eaton. So there's only one thing left to do, and that's to walk back to the park, which is just up here.
Eton leaves you with the sense of a parish shaped by water, work and determination, from the mills of Havana to the calm bend of the River Dane. Eton is packed with these little stories and tales which set it apart from other Cheshire places. There's a lot to discuss about the quarry, the pubs, the Millennium Park and the church, and they've all got their own bits to tell us. If there's a standout part of this one for me, it probably has to be Havana. Yes, I know it's not within Eton Village, but it's still part of the parish. Havana is such a cool little spot when Charles Rowe decided to build his empire. It was from there that Cuban cigars, which weren't actually Cuban, found their way into the world. It was all to do with Rowe's nod to the capture of the Cuban city in the 1760s. Now that's a proper bit of folklore.
By the Dane where the water drives the wheel, Havana wakes with copper, grain and thread. 5 great wheels turning hard against the fall, cigars rolled high above the rushing spread. This is Eton, shaped by river and grit, where the quarry cuts deep and the wagons sit, where the wagon and horses keeps the day alive, and the plow pours warmth when the workers arrive, where the park stands bright and the church stands tall, and the old school whispers its call. Eton Hall's ground now carved for glass and stone, buttons raised high as the diggers bite the earth, gravel rolling out along the road once known. This is Eton, shaped by river and grit, where the quarry cuts deep and the wagons sit. Keeps the day alive, and the plow pours warmth when the workers arrive, where the park stands bright and the church stands tall, and the old school whispers its call. Through the park that rose with 5 long years of work, where Harvey carved and Randall brushed the sign, past the church with its slate and ringing bells, past the hall where the lights first came to shine. This is Eton, shaped by river and grit, where the quarry cuts deep and the wagons sit, where the wagon and horses keeps the day alive, and the plow pours warmth when the workers arrive, where the park stands bright and the church stands tall, and the old school whispers its call.
Hello folks, welcome back to Cheshire East for the last time this week. Now you find me in this episode outside a pub. That right there is the Harrington Arms, which takes its name from a family that used to live in a hall, which we'll see in this episode. That hall, by the way, is one of the grandest and biggest that Cheshire has ever known. As well as the Harringtons, it was also the home of one Mary Fitton, Shakespeare's supposed Dark Lady. Let's learn a bit about her and a bit about everything else you can find in the parish of Gawsworth. Gawsworth, enclosure of the Smith. Rounding off this week's videos in Cheshire, we're in Gawsworth, located within some gently rolling countryside dotted with pools and woodland. It's an ancient parish of the Macclesfield Hundred with around 1700 residents today. The name Gawsworth is an interesting one. Linguists see it as a blend of Old Welsh and Old English, meaning roughly enclosure of the Smith, from the Welsh goth and the English worth. If that's the case, then there was probably some early contact between Welsh and English speakers here. In fact, people were here long before written records. A fine Neolithic flint axe, once found near the church field, suggests activity from around 2000 BC. Later, Anglo-Saxon farmers created the vill that became Gawsworth, carving fields from the edge of Macclesfield Forest. By the time of the Norman conquest, this was valuable ground. Soon it became the possession of Hugh Lupus, the Earl of Chester. Over time, a forest was cleared and a parish structure was emerging, with Gawsworth one of the key ones around Macclesfield. In the Domesday Book, Gawsworth appears as Gooseward. It was recorded as a waste after the conquest, though earlier it was worth 20 shillings. Extensive woodland and 2 stock enclosures are mentioned, underlining its mixed farming and former forest character. From the 12th century, the manor passed through a small number of families, namely the de Orrebys, the Fittons, the Earls of Macclesfield and the Earls of Harrington. Legal disputes and even a fatal duel in 1712 marked changes in its ownership. If one place captures Gawsworth today, it's Gawsworth Old Hall. It's a black and white timber-framed Tudor house which began to be built in around 1480. It was once home to the Fittons. It's Grade 1 listed and it's famed for its gardens and open-air summer performances. A walk around Gawsworth will also take in some other atmospheric sights, like for example the Church of St James with its 15th century nave and Fitton tombs. There's also an old cross base, maggoty wood and even traces of an old canal. Gawsworth has attracted some amazing figures. The Fitton family produced Mary Fitton, often thought to be possibly the Dark Lady of Shakespeare's sonnets. Then there's Samuel Maggoty Johnson, England's last professional jester, who lies in Maggoty Wood. So in Gawsworth you have a parish where several stories all sit within one compact area, and there's a lot of stories to tell. Visiting this one makes it easy to read 1,000 years of English rural life in one fell swoop. Let's go. Gawsworth can be split into 3 parts: the main village, an older area around the church and the hall, and a detached portion on Congleton Road, where this pub stands. This is the Harrington Arms, which has been Grade 2 listed since 1976, but its origins run far earlier. Its structure reaches back to the late 1600s or early 1700s, and that age is clear in every corner. It's built of red brick with a stone slate roof, giving it an earthy, grounded look. The original 3-storey block survives, as does its early cogged brickwork. Inside, a staircase with pierced splat balusters remains in place, a real survivor from a bygone age. In the 1800s, a new wing was added, blending in with ease. The bar counter was refitted in the late 1900s, yet it sits comfortably among the older features. Camera's heritage inventory adds another badge of honour, and today it's owned by Robinson's Brewery. It still feels linked to its brewing past, fitting for a building that's seen so much. Above all, the Harrington Arms stands as a rare rural pub example. The Church of St James the Great stands beside Gawsworth Hall, and walking up to it brings you face to face with stonework dating to 1430, when the limestone nave was built. The chancel and the tower followed in 1480. Its Grade 1 listing from 1967 underlines its importance. Its perpendicular style is easy to see.
Clean vertical lines pull your eyes upward, while the tower adds angular buttresses and empty niches that once held carved figures. Even without them, the shapes and shadows give the tower a bold outline. Gargoyles and pinnacles sit high above. Inside, the nave roof still carries faint traces of its early bright paint. Near the chancel, the roof shifts to panelled sections that are unusual and finely made. An octagonal font from the 1500s stands near the nave, and at the eastern end, the window by William Wales brings soft colour into the chancel. The chancel screen, added in 1893, stands where a medieval one once stood, with cross figures added above in 1978. In the sanctuary, the Fitton tombs take pride of place. The oldest, dated 1608, is a superb alabaster piece. Nearby, there's a memorial to Mary Fitton. More on her in a bit. Now, there's one church I hope is open this week. It's this one. Let's see if it is. North door, enter here. Oh yes, brilliant, brilliant. It's open. That's what I wanted. Right, let's have a look. Let's have a look and see if we can find those tombs. Straight away I can see the tombs, but we can only go as far as here. The church is alarmed beyond this point according to this sign, so I'm not going to go through there, but I can at least see the tombs in question either side of the altar. There you go, you see? Magnificent. Brilliant those are. Well worth coming into this church for. Let's have a look at the rest of the church. It's beautiful in here. Lovely blue carpet. That looks fantastic in the sunlight coming through these windows. There's plenty of stuff on the side walls. Let's go and check some of that out. See what we've got. Ooh, let's add a bit of tapestry there. Our Nicky would like that. Long time viewers will know who Nicky is. It's the missus. For those who don't know, the missus sometimes comes with me, and often we call into church because Nicky quite likes church architecture. There's the font at the back with its very tall cover on top. That's beautiful, isn't it? Look at the carving on that. At the back we've got a funeral bier with what looks to be an Easter scene or maybe a nativity scene on it. Not quite sure which. I think it's probably Easter given what time of the year it is. There's a memorial, war memorial at the back there as well. Gallery up above the font. It's lovely. And you know what? It's just as lovely outside this church as it is on the inside. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. Let's go back out this door. I had to laugh at this when I came in. Please close the door to keep the heat in and stray animals out, except lost and wandering sheep, who are most welcome. Brilliant. So, out we go. Now, what I mean by the outside looks beautiful as well is that sort of underneath this church, in front of it, there's like a big pond. Check this out. And this stretches pretty much for the entire length of the front of the church. What we're going to do, we're going to walk around this and make our way towards Gawsworth Hall. Near the church are some unusual earthworks. They are not the remains of houses, or that of a manorial complex, or that indeed of a castle. Instead, they form something rarely discussed on TVI. Large and rectangular, tradition in Gawsworth has long held that they were an old tilting ground. They are where jousting riders once thundered past each other with lowered lances. Now, whether or not that ever happened, the scale of these earthworks is impressive. Recent research has cast doubt on jousting here, but that only adds to the intrigue. The earthworks sit within substantial garden walls, linking neatly with the formal garden phases that once surrounded Gawsworth Hall. Its alignment with the hall's south front is hard to overlook, as though it was meant to be seen from the house, perhaps as part of a planned vista. Early antiquarian reports from 1850 record the site in detail, sparking debate that continued in papers from 1851 and 52. The Fitton family shaped these grounds, and it's easy to imagine them commissioning works here, whether for sport or for display. The earthwork shape resembles known tilt-yard forms elsewhere, keeping the jousting idea alive even if it is unproven. No fittings linked to jousting have ever been found, but regardless, that does not lessen their appeal. Gawsworth Hall stands on the footprint of an earlier Norman manor. Built between 1480 and 1600, its black and white timbering is its finest feature, fully worthy of the Grade 1 listing it's held since 1952. It was once based around a quadrangle, but later changes reduced it to a U-shape. The site even had its own chapel, recorded in 1365, long before the present house took form. The Fitton family lived here until 1611, and their influence is present throughout the hall. Inside, priest holes from the 1500s hide in unexpected corners, and in the library there's a bookcase designed by Pugin. Outside, the grounds hold their own Grade 2 listing. The pleasure garden once covered between 20 and 30 acres. Old maps reveal how it could be flooded using sluices to create a shallow ornamental lake. The grounds also once contained a maze and a brick revetment. The hall's peace was broken in 1712 when a fierce dispute over ownership ended in a duel in Hyde Park in London. Both men in the duel died, and the event became one of the most talked about clashes of its time. Gawsworth Hall later passed to William Stanhope, the first Earl of Harrington. That's how the Harrington Arms, which we saw earlier, gets its name. It's thanks to that family. It remained with them until 1935, when it was bought by the Cheshire antiquary Raymond Richards. The house is still owned and run by the Richards family today. Not far from Gawsworth Hall stands a statue of Sir Robert Peel. Peel served twice as Prime Minister, and seeing him here in this quiet corner of Cheshire adds a touch of national history to Gawsworth. The life-size stone statue originally stood in Peel Park in Salford before coming here. It arrived after the Second World War, when Raymond Richards purchased it for the estate. Richards had a keen eye for heritage. He collected items from historic buildings being demolished in the 1960s, often displaying them in the hall's grounds. He purposely placed this statue here because he knew it would be noticed. It overlooks the hall's entrance and it's Grade 2 listed. The statue dates from the mid-1800s, when monuments to Peel were rising across Britain. Peel also had links to Cheshire reformers who supported his ideas. Here's a bit more about that duel. Now, this certainly wasn't a sudden quarrel or a rash moment of temper. It was the latest flare-up in a bitter feud between two Cheshire families whose rivalry had simmered for generations, the Fittons being one and the Gerards being the other. Following the death of Sir Edward Fitton, the 2nd Baronet in 1643, the estate here passed to Charles Gerard, who later became the 1st Earl of Macclesfield. There was a dispute about the legal ownership of the estate between Sir Charles and his cousin Alexander Fitton. That was resolved in Sir Charles's favour in 1663, and that should possibly have been the end of it. It wasn't. At the beginning of the 18th century, the dispute between the Fittons and the Gerards resurfaced, culminating in a duel in Hyde Park, London in 1712 between the rival claimants. They were Lord Mohun from the Gerard family and the 4th Duke of Hamilton from the Fittons. Both of the combatants were killed in the duel, which honestly resolved nothing. As a result, the estate remained with the Gerards until William Stanhope came along. And here's a bit more about Mary Fitton, as promised. Mary Fitton has long been one of the most frequently proposed candidates for the mysterious Dark Lady of Shakespeare's sonnet. She was born at Gawsworth Hall to Sir Edward Fitton and Alice Holcroft. Mary entered the royal household in the mid-1590s as a maid of honour to Queen Elizabeth I. Her arrival at court placed her at the centre of political ambition, theatrical culture and personal intrigue, conditions that later encouraged speculation about her connection to Shakespeare. Fitton's early years at court were marked by attention from powerful men. Sir William Knollys, the ageing comptroller of the Queen's household, became infatuated with her almost immediately. His pursuit was widely mocked, and his letters to her family reveal a man besotted far beyond propriety. Mary, however, showed little interest in him, instead becoming known for her boldness, confidence and willingness to push at the boundaries of courtly behaviour. In 1600, she led a masked performance at Blackfriars during the wedding festivities of Lady Anne Russell. That event was attended by William Herbert, the future 3rd Earl of Pembroke. Her affair with Herbert soon followed. Their relationship was passionate but unstable, and when Mary became pregnant in 1601, Herbert refused to marry her. The scandal was severe enough that both were dismissed from court. Mary gave birth to a son who died in infancy, and her reputation never fully recovered. She later had a relationship with Sir Richard Leveson, with whom she had another child. The link between Mary Fitton and Shakespeare's Dark Lady emerged in the 19th century, when scholars began searching for real individuals behind the sonnets. Fitton's court career, her affair with Herbert, and her notoriety made her an attractive candidate. The idea gained traction because it created a neat triangle. You can picture Shakespeare writing to a young nobleman and a dangerous, alluring woman, both of whom were connected in real life. However, modern scholarship is far more cautious. Encyclopaedia Britannica notes that although Fitton is considered by some to be the still mysterious Dark Lady, there is no evidence she ever met Shakespeare, and the identification is now discounted in most serious scholarship. The theory survives though, largely because it's dramatic, not because it's well supported. More speculative interpretations go further still. Some fringe theories claim that Mary not only inspired the sonnets, but also co-authored them. Others reckon the Shakespeare works were produced by a circle around William Herbert and Mary Sidney. These ideas are not accepted by mainstream historians, but they do illustrate how strongly Mary Fitton's life continues to attract imaginative reinterpretation. What is certain is that Mary Fitton lived a bold, entangled life with powerful men, and she will be forever linked, fairly or not, to one of literature's greatest mysteries. Whether or not she was Shakespeare's Dark Lady, she remains one of the most vivid figures of Elizabethan scandal.
Okay, so that's the older part of Gawsworth, but there is a newer part to this village as well, and that means we're off for a walk next. We're going to drive up the road that links the old bit and the new bit together, and then when we get to the new bit, we'll just have a wander around and see what else we can find. There is actually quite an interesting story to tell you when we get to one certain part of this walk. It involves a wood and a guy who lies there now. His grave is in said wood. We'll find out who that is in a moment.
Now it's time to go walking. Landmark number 1 is a chapel shaped by 250 years of Methodist presence in Gawsworth. Early worshippers gathered wherever they could, and baptisms often took place in a kitchen at Lowes Farm. Everything changed though on the 26th of April 1893 when the present chapel opened. The opening celebration drew 350 people for a tea in a marquee. It was then known as Gawsworth Wesleyan Chapel. Thomas Hadfield, who lived nearby, became one of its strongest supporters during the 1890s. The adjoining hall, added later, gave the chapel space for groups and gatherings. Ever since, this chapel has hosted teas, talks and small events. One of the longest running groups here is the Girls' Brigade, active for more than 50 years. If you stand near St James's Church and look across the lane, you are close to where Gawsworth's first school opened in 1707, built by Lord Mohun. It served the village until 1832, and later it became a rectory. Soon after 1832, a new school appeared here, taking over the task of teaching local children. Its position near the crossroads made it easy to reach, and it quickly became a site recognised by anyone passing through. From 1832 to 1966, it carried the weight of daily lessons. As the village grew, the building struggled to keep up, and a replacement opened in 1966. The old school is now a residence, which retains the old traditional stone frontage. Attendance registers from the 1800s still survive for this old school.
Now, directly opposite the old school, there's a gate that leads into something called Gawsworth Park, and this is the main sort of sports and recreation area here in Gawsworth. The village hall is also in these parts too. Let's check them both out.
Next we have the playing field, a large green space shaped in the mid-1900s when the parish decided it needed a proper area for outdoor functions. Before this, an earlier field stood close to Church Lane. As the village grew in the 20th century, the need for a larger, better drained space became clear. The football pitch, therefore, has been marked out since the 1960s, and the 1970s brought the current tennis courts. A decade later, the children's playground arrived. Drainage was improved in 1994 with new pipes beneath the surface. Boundary hedges planted in the late 1950s now frame the space. The parish council manages the field today, with contractors keeping it ready for whatever the village needs next. Gawsworth's village hall took shape in the late 20th century, replacing an older parish hall that had served the village for decades. Its position beside the playing field gives it an open setting, and being on Church Lane, it makes it easy to reach. Inside, the hall hosts parish meetings and events and becomes the polling station during elections. A major refurbishment took place in the early 2000s. A new kitchen arrived in around 2004, the heating was upgraded soon afterwards, and the fire safety system was updated in 2010.
You may have noticed there as well, there's also a scout hut, which is also part of the playing field recreation ground. It's the white building next to the village hall. In front of that scout hut we have a parish notice board. You know what that means? It's card time. So let's do the honours here in Gawsworth. That's another one down in Cheshire East. Now, opposite all of this, the board and the two halls, there's a cross. There we go, there's a cross. I didn't find a lot about this cross, to be honest with you, but I still want to put it on the map as always. So there you go. across on a little triangular green here opposite the village hall, etc. There's a pump on this green too. Can you see the pump there on the other side? And then at the front of the green, on the sort of pointy bit of the triangle, there's also a war memorial behind this tree. Can you see that? Brilliant. All on the green right here in Gawsworth. Now we come to a patch of woodland that might be a bit easy to overlook if you just looked on the map. This is Maggotty Wood, named after Samuel Johnson, whose nickname was Maggotty. He was the last court jester in England, and he died in 1773. Today, this wood carries his name with a sense of playful pride. At its centre stands his Grade II listed grave. It's an unexpected sight among these trees. Johnson served as jester to the Lees of Lyme, and his wit made him well known across Cheshire. The woodland itself is a mix of oak, beech and birch. It once formed part of the Gawsworth estate, and coppicing was recorded here in the 1800s. In spring, bluebells sweep across parts of this wood. So why was Maggotty buried here? Well, it was his own choice. Before his death, he asked specifically to be buried away from the church, and that wish brought his grave to this quiet spot. In a way, it feels just right, peaceful, still, and slightly theatrical. Well, you can forget Gawsworth Hall, or at least I can, because this is the main reason I wanted to come to Gawsworth today, to see the grave of Maggotty Johnson, Samuel Johnson. Now, there is an inscription on the tablet on top of his grave, but of course years of weathering have made it a little bit less legible now. No matter, because there's a stump just in front of his grave, and this tells you what the inscription says. So let's see if we can read it. Stay thou, whom chance directs or ease persuades, to seek the quiet of these sylvan shades. Here undisturbed and bid from vulgar eyes, a wit, musician, poet, player lies. A dancing master too, in grace he shone, and all the arts of opera were his own. In comedy well skilled, he drew Lord Flame, acted the part and gained himself the name. Averse to strife, how oft he'd gravely say, these peaceful groves should shade his breathless clay. That when he rose again, laid here alone, no friend and he should quarrel for a bone. Thinking that were some old lame gossip nigh, she possibly may take his leg or thigh.
Gawsworth Primary School opened in September 1966, replacing the old Crossroads School after it reached its limits. The move marked a big moment for the village. The new school was designed as a single-storey building, a forward-looking style at the time. The original classrooms had parquet flooring that caught the sun, and heating came from an oil-fired boiler. The first head teacher, Mr. H. Barlow, guided the school through its early years. With around 90 pupils, it had a size suited to village life back then. A playing field was added soon afterwards, giving children space to run and play football. A PTA formed in the 1970s, extensions arrived in the 1980s, and a new library came along in the 1990s. A brand new ICT suite was built in around 2002. The school badge, by the way, features Gawsworth Hall.
And then just after the school, it becomes all residential again. You've got this lovely, massive green with paths that go all across it, surrounded by these sort of, I imagine they're sort of old people's bungalows. That's how I'd describe them. Certainly they look that way. It's nice anyway, and it's beautiful in the sunshine. So we're going to head through here, back out onto the main road, and make our way back to Southview Avenue, which is where we started this walk. We're not quite done yet with Gawsworth, because there is one big thing that we still need to mention. It's out to the east. It's something called Danes Moss.
Danes Moss lies to the east of Gawsworth, a huge area within the parish boundaries. It first appears on a 1777 map marked as a peat bog. It's the largest lowland raised bog in Cheshire, sitting in a basin left by retreating ice sheets thousands of years ago. Over 8,000 years ago, the basin turned into reed and fen swamp. As time passed, sphagnum moss took over, building a raised bog that rose gently above its surroundings. The bog once stretched far further than it does now. Danes Moss sits on a watershed, with water draining north to the River Bollin and south to the River Dane. Long before Macclesfield grew nearby, this was already a busy place for wildlife and those who used it. In prehistoric times, people hunted wildfowl here. Fast forward to the 1970s, and researchers sank boreholes to pull up deep peat cores. The dark cylinders held pollen, plant fragments and charcoal, tiny clues that help rebuild the past. Part of Danes Moss is now cared for as a Cheshire Wildlife Trust Reserve. That protects just over 22 hectares. Adjacent land has been used as landfill, and proposals for housing have hung over parts of the peat in recent years, although campaigners argue that building here would damage wildlife and the bog's huge store of carbon. In certain areas on the moss, you will see railway tracks. They were part of the Danes Moss tramway built to move peat across the bog. Operated by the British Moss Litter Company, it linked the cutting fields with nearby railway sidings. Commercial peat cutting began in 1904 here, and by the 1920s the company had purchased the freehold. The tramway was horse-drawn throughout its life. Its 3-foot gauge made it compact and suited to soft ground. The horse that worked the line was known as Star, a name noted in old accounts. Crude timber bridges carried the line over drainage cuts. The tramway remained active until the mid-1960s. In 1962, a rail tour visited, giving enthusiasts a rare chance to ride the wagons. The track beds can still be traced on aerial images too, faint but unmistakable. And so we reach the end of Gawsworth. This one's got a lot to it, hasn't it? From the Tiltings earthworks to the tramway on the moss, there's loads here to pique your interest. Spend a little time here and the links between places begin to stand out. You can walk from the playing field to the village hall, from the school to the church, and from the hall gardens to the moss edge without ever losing that sense of connection. For me though, it's the woodland knoll where Maggoty Johnson lies which steals the show. And when you step back and take it all in, Gawsworth feels like a place that invites you to slow down and look properly. It's the sort of place where a short walk becomes a small adventure, and where every turn gives you another glimpse of what makes Gawsworth such a pleasure to explore.
I dance through halls with a jester's grin, a spark in my step and mischief within. Courtiers laughed as I played my part, a wandering fool with a restless art. I left those halls for a calmer track, found peace in the trees and never looked back. Gawsworth's woods felt right for my soul, a place where a fool could feel whole. I'm maggoty still, in the moss I stay, in the moss I stay. My laugh in the leaves at the close of day, at the close of day. They set my stone on a raised old mound, iron rails guarding my chosen ground. No churchyard earth for a man like me, just peat and birch and the scent of the leaves. Walk through the wood and you'll sense my stride, a light old step where the shadows glide. I linger here with a playful air, a jester spark in the woodland air. I'm maggoty still, in the moss I stay, in the moss I stay. My laugh in the leaves at the close of day, at the close of day. Rail tour came in '62, folks rode the wagons and passed my view. They spoke my name with a puzzled smile, wondering why I chose this mile. But a fool knows well where the best jokes lie, in a place where the peat sits high. I rest where the birch trunks lean and sway, and that suits me fine at the end of day. I'm maggoty still, in the moss I stay, in the moss I stay. My laugh in the leaves at the close of day, at the close of day. Twister, twig, snap, soft drummy roll, tap, tap. Twig snap, ha ha ha, through the trees. I'm maggoty still, in the moss I stay, in the moss I stay. My laugh in the leaves at the close of day, at the close of day. So if you pass my stone in the fading light, nod for a fool who loved the night. I lived with joy and found modest fame. I was maggoty, and I was proud of that name.
Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.